Right, good morning, everyone. Can I welcome you to this meeting of the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority Audit and Governance Committee. We have new members here this morning: Councillor Peter Lacey, Councillor Martin Rowley. Very pleased to welcome you to the committee, and perhaps it might be useful if we just run round the table and say who we are. So, Dave Merritt, I'm from the City of York Council and chair of this meeting. I represent the Guildhall ward in York.
Rachel Antonelli, Director of Legal and Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Paul Clark, Head of Governance at the Combined Authority.
Andrew Hoyer, Councillor on City of York Council.
Peter Lacey, as introduced. Thank you very much, Dave.
Councillor Caroline Goodrick, North Yorkshire Council, Sheriff Hutton and Wet Division.
Hi there, I'm Stuart Cutts. I'm your Head of Internal Audit and I work for Veritag.
I'm Sophie Hurst, I'm the External Audit Manager at Office Bazaars.
Like outside engagement partner for Forms Bazaars.
I am Mike Russell, Director of Resources and Section 73 Officers at the Combined Authority.
Morning, I'm Becky Cann, Head of Compliance and Data Protection Officer for the Combined Authority.
Hi, I'm Debbie Walton, Assurance and Risk Manager at the Combined Authority.
Councillor Martin Rowley, City of York Council, representing the Oswaldwick and Derwent ward.
Cliff Lund, North Yorkshire Council and Vice Chair of this august body.
And Will Baines from Democratic Services at the Combined Authority.
Right, so there are two colleagues at the back.
Hi, I'm Sarah Blackie. I'm Leadership Support Officer for James Parry.
I'm Hugh and some work experience and leadership support team at the.
Okay, welcome. Nice to see there's interest in our meetings. Right. Okay, we have apologies for absence from Councillors Carl Arthur, Dr. Stuart Green and Councillor Rachel Melly. So item 2, the draft minutes of the meeting on the 15th of April 2026. Is everyone happy that they are a correct record? If someone would like to move that.
I move.
Yeah, is that seconded? I'll second it. Right, okay. So if there's no issues arising, can I have your agreement to sign them as a true and correct record?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest that haven't already been declared on their forms? No, thank you. Okay, public participation. We have no public questions or statements received by the deadline. So we move on then to item 5, the annual report of the Head of Internal Audit, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This is one of the committee's key assurance reports as it provides an independent opinion on adequacy and effectiveness of the authority's arrangements for risk management, internal control and governance, which is an important source of assurance for this committee with its roles and responsibilities, as well as the organisation with the annual governance statement. I think it's worth briefly reflecting on where we were a year ago. Members may recall that I issued a limitation of scope opinion this time last year because the assurance arrangements and the coverage arrangements were not sufficiently developed to allow me to give a full opinion. So I think one of the significant developments that we need to reflect on is over the last year we have introduced and started to operate that internal audit assurance framework, which was approved by this committee in January, which has enabled me with this report to provide assurance from both internal audit providers and provide a fully informed opinion for the authority as a whole. The headline conclusion from this work is I'm able to provide a reasonable assurance opinion. In reaching that conclusion, I've considered, as just mentioned, the full body of assurance work completed by both providers, management's response to findings, the follow-up activity, and you will see in the report itself, since the last committee, we've completed 3 significant pieces of work which has helped to inform that opinion, which is on performance management, risk management, and cybersecurity and business continuity, of which full copies of the reports have been sent to members when they were issued. The report identifies one significant internal control weakness relating to performance management. Our work resulted in a limited assurance opinion. This was a known issue by management rather than an emerging concern. Management accepted the findings, improvement actions have been agreed, and the matter has been recognised in the draft annual governance statement, which appears as a separate agenda item later on today. I think more broadly, I'd say that the audit work reflects an organisation whose governance, performance and risk management arrangements continue to develop and become embedded. Our findings and improvement opportunities are not unexpected in a relatively young organisation. I've taken confidence from the way officers have accepted the findings and have developed those improvement plans. One final point to mention is the report itself covers the quality of your internal audit service itself with the Quality and Improvement Programme. Members can place reliance on the assurance and opinions and the quality of the work provided by internal audit with information included in that report. It's useful and important with your role that you take assurance over those processes that underpin them. And that aspect of our report confirms that your internal audit service continues to conform with the global internal audit standards, and there are no issues affecting the reliability of the opinion which I can present to you today. To sum up, the report demonstrates a stronger assurance position than we were able to report last year, gives an authority-wide opinion supported by meaningful assurance work guided by the joint framework that we agreed with RSM, and happy to take any questions members may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. Are there any questions? I think that indicates how comprehensive your report was and satisfactory, Stuart. Are we happy, therefore, to agree the recommendations, which are one, to note the annual report of the Head of Internal Audit for 2025-6, the reasonable assurance opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the authority's framework of governance, risk management and control as set out in Appendix 1. 2, to note the significant governance weaknesses identified by the Head of Internal Audit for inclusion within the 2025-26 annual governance statement. And 3, to note the outcomes of the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme, including the confirmation that the Internal Audit Service conforms to the global internal audit standards in the UK public sector. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Let's move on then to item 6, the Data Protection Officer's report from Becky Cannon.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. So this report covers the period from March to May 2026 and highlights. I've kept it the same format as the information governance plan that was at this committee in April. Freedom of information requests and other information rights requests have been highlighted. One point to note, is that in those 3 months that we've covered, we are across the board, sort of as a combined authority with the Central Services, Economy, Transport, Fire and Rescue and PFC, are currently at 94% compliance for replying to freedom of information and other information rights requests within the statutory deadlines, and our benchmark is 90%. So that has been a good few months on that side. The other point I just wanted to highlight from the report was training. I know that around whether areas are actually reporting security incidents. So I've been doing a monthly sort of like a bite-sized awareness topics just to remind people and keep it in their forefront of everybody's minds. Along with from the end of July onwards, I'll be doing a monthly sort of information compliance advice surgery, for want of a better word, so people can come ask any questions without any sort of because I want to just take away the sort of fear of reporting anything. So just I will be available for that. And on that, and I can't say whether there's been any sort of correlation with the training and subsequent incidents as yet, but we've had over the last 3 months across the board, there's been 5 information security incidents, 3 assessed as very low, and 2 near misses. So they weren't actually breaches, but could have been. And again, people are reporting those near misses, which I think is only a good thing. So yeah, that was all I wanted to highlight from the report. But if anyone had any questions.
Okay, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking for a microphone to hit, but you're clearly we are far more advanced here in Northallerton than we are in West Offices. Thank you, Becky, for that report. I'm just curious, really. Well done on being at 94% of your benchmark at 90. I'm just curious for the reasons that we're not hitting those FOIs. Are there any particular reasons around that?
Not any trends that I've identified over the last 3 months, but I think it tends to be sometimes some of the requests can be quite complex, and if we've only got a couple of people that have the detail, and then if they've not been around, it's quite hard to get that information in the right space. But that's there isn't a trend as far as I can see at the moment.
And sorry, Chester. And I'm assuming that every request is acknowledged straight away. So
yes.
Yeah, because sometimes that can be a bit of a frustration with
no, absolutely. So all of the correspondence with the applicants is done by Veritao, who deal with a lot of our information compliance and data protection work at the moment. So their process is, as soon as they get it, they acknowledge the customer, and if there is going to be a significant delay and we need to extend it, they will also correspond with them.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. Could I ask a question? At the last Audit and Governance Committee, when we were discussing the information governance, we were told that an interim disclosure log was going to be created for the central services, economy, transport teams. I was just wondering how that's progressing.
That's still being worked on as part of some of the broader transformation work, along with the website, because it will need to go on there. But it is on part of the plan. It's not there yet, but I am very aware that we need to have that disclosure log on there. If nothing else, it prevents repeat requests, because if the information's already on there, so it is fire and rescue and PFC currently have separate ones, central services, economy and transport. There isn't one yet, but it is part of the bigger kind of quite complex website sort of redesign, so it's on that agenda.
Any sort of broad indications of time scale?
I don't have that, I'm afraid, but I can get that for you for the report on it the next time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on this report? If not, can we thank Becky and agree to note the report? Thank you. Right, item 7. This was a late circulation, the external audit strategy memorandum. So Sophie Hurst and Mark Outerside.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our audit strategy memorandum, or audit plan as it used to be called, for the year ending 31st of March 2026. And it sets out the scope of our audit, which includes the audit of the financial statements, completion of our value for money responsibilities, and our wider reporting responsibilities as required. The executive summary gives an overview of the audit team and the approach we're taking and the planned timeline. We aim to complete the audit ahead of the January 27 backstop deadline, and our plan outlines the proposed approach to building assurance for the period subject to disclaimer opinions since 23-24. This will predominantly involve retrospective testing of historical transactions and balances. We have planned to allocate resources to deliver this work in accordance with the proposed timetable. However, This is the first time we've undertaken assurance work using this approach, and it's important to acknowledge the inherent risks and uncertainties. We are essentially completing a lot more audit work in 1 year, which will result in significant additional work for both the audit and Mike's teams. But we're confident we can do that. I've just added that. I'll now hand you over to Sophie, who will take you through the remainder of the report.
Thanks, Mark. So as Mark's just said, we're aiming to rebuild assurance fully in 25-26. So that means that during this year's audit, we'll be testing cadences across the 3 financial periods today. We'll work closely with Mike and with the finance team as well. And as long as we get the cooperation, the audit should all go smoothly, hopefully. In terms of our risk assessment, we've identified 3 significant risks for this year's audit. They're set out on pages 8 to 10. So that's management override of controls, which is a mandatory significant risk on all audits, so nothing particular to the combined authority. And then we've got the valuation of land and buildings and evaluation of the net defined benefit pension scheme. These are also significant risks that are consistent with risks that we identify on other local authority audits as well. So again, nothing specific. Page 13 then goes on to set out our planning materiality for both the group and the single entity. As set out, we've used the draft financial statements as the basis for this, and we've calculated it based on 1.5% of gross operating expenditure. Overall materiality for the single entity is 6.8 million, and then 7.7 million for the group. Our performance materiality, which is the level that we test anything over, and then also our triviality thresholds are also set out in the report for your information. Page 16 then goes on to talk about value for money arrangements and our responsibilities in regards to that. We identified 4 significant weaknesses in the prior years, which we will be following up as part of this year's audit as well, on 25-26. I won't go into too much detail on those, but they're also on pages 18 and 19 for your information. We've requested a self-assessment from management as well on their arrangements and getting their perspective of what's gone on in 25-26, and once we get that, we'll review that and start to progress the work. But that covers the main points, and we're happy to take any questions for that.
Okay, are there any questions of members? If I could, yes, Councillor Lacey.
You request whether there are any other risks to be identified. I just wonder at what stage and at what level any risks associated were the mayor to decide to go for the holiday tax, the accommodation tax, in terms of reputation or financial risk, etc. So at what stage would that enter the risk register process?
So that is it's a good question, but it's not one that I would expect to feature in our financial statements audit work. And it's not something we've actually considered to this stage in terms of value for money. But
is it a question for somebody else in terms of
someone else?
Right, and who might that someone else be?
I'll probably pick up. I think in the context of the visit to levy, at this stage, the authority has no set plan to implement that levy.
Indeed, it's an if. So,
and before anything would move forward, there would be probably quite a detailed consultation phase that would take place. So, at the moment, that's on our horizon, and we're aware that it may come from a risk perspective. It's not something that appears foremost on our risk registers because it's uncertain as to whether it will happen at the time.
Thank you, Mike. That's clear.
Can I ask a question? Thank you. I just wanted to be assured that you were on or the authority is on the right tracks. I know we've had a couple of bumpy years where the audit hasn't gone as well as we would have wished. But do you foresee any problems coming forward? And are you satisfied that it's getting better?
Based on the discussions we've had thus far this year, we are comfortable that we will be able to deliver this audit. And that is obviously predicated by the discussion we've had with Mike and the team in and around their resources that they've got allocated for the service of the audit. But at this point in time, if that's not a risk at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
That was an honest answer, wasn't it?
Okay, can I just ask a couple of questions? in terms of the additional reassurance that you're expecting to do this year, does that mean that potentially at the end of this year we can end up without a disclaimed opinion? Yeah, good.
Always got to do that.
Right. Okay. Can I just ask, in terms of page 13 of your report, the specific materiality items that you've introduced for last year? Can I understand the basis of the levels that you've chosen for those two items?
So the senior officers remuneration, we have our specific materiality set in line with the bandings that it would appear in the tables that are in the financial statements. So it's, in this instance, 5k would change the banding, and that's what we're saying would have a material impact on the financial statements, and it would change the way the reader would see the accounts for that note in particular. And then exit packages are quite sensitive in nature, so we've just dropped it down to 50k, taking into account the balance that is normally for exit packages. We're obviously not expecting anything material like the 7 million, so we dropped it right down, so it's reflective of what the balance is.
Can I ask a further question in terms of the fees for next year? If I look first on page 7 on the group audit scope, there's quite a heavy weighting towards police, the police side of the authority's responsibility in terms of the balances that are being looked at. But when you look at the fees, the balance of the fees seems to be primarily against the authority and only a relatively small amount against the police. So I just wondered about that, whether I'm missing something.
I think with the Chief Constable, while it does have a lot of expenditure in comparison to the combined authority, it's got very few actual balances in their financial statements. So they've got pensions and expenditure, and that's largely it. So the fee for the Chief Constable is respective of the amount of work that would be required to undertake that audit, whereas with the combined authority, we've got group financial statements, we've got a full balance sheet, grant income, expenditure. There's a lot more that goes into that audit than what's required for the CC.
The authority as well, if you think about what's the PCC is now incorporated within the combined authority. So accounts for single entity, we call them. That's driving that as well.
That, Chair. So the way that works is you can see in the audit memorandum, because it's the way Mazars look at it, is they look at it on a legal entity basis. So you've got an audit fee for the combined authority, which, as Mark said, includes all the assets and liabilities that the Chief Constable uses. It also includes the fire service. It also includes the general budgets element of that. The Chief Constable has his own set of separate accounts and his own audit, which is mainly about his operational spend, his people, and the other things that are in there. So within our internal accounting, the appropriate reserve based on, I think the weighting we used last year was around budget size. So we will allocate a chunk of the budget to the police fund for the audit, a chunk of the budget to the fire service reserves for the audit, and a chunk to general reserves. So what you see in Mark's presentation is not the internal allocation across the activity streams, it's just the legal entity allocation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, can we agree to note the memorandum? Yep, thank you. It's agreed. Right, let's move on then to the draft financial statements and annual governance statement. Your report, Mike.
Thanks, Chair. So this report presents the draft statement of accounts and annual governance statements for the year to 31st of March 2026 and gives the committee an opportunity to review and comment on them before completion of the external audit process. Members are asked to note and comment on the draft accounts and governance statement, delegate authority for any minor amendments arising through the audit process to be made, and note the final audited versions will return to this committee in January 2027 for approval following the audit and in advance of the backstop date, which Mark mentioned earlier. In terms of the financial position, the key message is that the authority remains financially sound. The Combined Authority delivered a balanced outturn for the year, with all constituent budgets operating within approved funding envelopes. Both police and fire functions reported modest underspends. Members may see that expenditure within the general budget side of the Combined Authority was lower than the approved funding envelope, but this primarily reflects the timing and reprofiling of the programmes rather than any underlying financial concerns. The same applies to capital programmes, which are largely across the policing and fire aspects of the authority, where delivery of 15.2 million was made against a budget of 23.8 million. The slippage there in detail is due to a number of factors, but there was issues in terms of lead times on key equipment, including fire appliances and police fleet, and IT due to a shortage of chips, and then some estates programmes have also slipped due to contractor availability and some delivery deadlines on key pieces of equipment such as lifts and other key aspects. The reserve positions remain strong, with total usable reserves of £63.8 million. The narrative report concludes that the authority remains financially sustainable, with no indicators of financial instability and a balanced medium-term financial plan across all areas. Turning to the governance, the overall conclusion is generally positive. The draft annual governance statement concludes that governance arrangements are operating effectively and appropriate to the authority's current stage of development. Significant progress has been made over the last year in strengthening financial governance, risk management, information governance and internal audit arrangements. One significant governance issue still remains, with considerable progress made in developing a corporate performance management framework. The framework is yet to be approved, fully embedded or consistently applied across the organisation. That delay is partly due to the fact the organisation has continued to develop the underlying strategies and plans which would underpin the performance management regime. As a result, performance management remains on the governance action plan for 2026-27 and will continue to be a key area of focus. Finally, members should note that these are draft and audited documents. They're currently subject to public inspection and will be reviewed by our external auditors, Forms Mazars, during the autumn. Any audit findings or required amendments will be reported back to the committee alongside the final accounts in January. A meeting has also been held with the Chair and Vice Chair in advance of this meeting to gather initial comments on the draft accounts. A number of suggestions in relation to the detail presented in the narrative statement and certain governance conclusions have been gathered, and any resulting amendments will be reflected in the final draft of the documents, which will come back to this committee. Chair, in summary, the accounts demonstrate a sustainable financial position, continued improvement in governance arrangements, and a clear programme of further development. At that point, I'll hand it over to questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Are there questions? Right, Councillor Lunn.
Thank you, Chair. Can we assume that the budget figures which have not been spent will be rolled over in the capital budget into future years?
Yes, so there's a paper taken to the Combined Authority at the last meeting, I can't remember exactly when it was, I think it was probably June, which took the budget rollover through. So that roll has been approved and carried in. I think it's important to note that, and one of the weaknesses that was addressed through this year was that our budgets were set in a number of cases because we got funding quite late to provide an envelope for commitment of spend rather than a profile for spend. So the amounts that were allowed have been now committed, but the spend will actually carry forward in subsequent years. And that's why you see a difference in the accounting treatment versus the commitment, because we want teams to be able to commit, but the accounting treatment is when spent and when those milestones have been met on programmes.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Lacey.
Builds on that question, I think, because as I understand it, the summary statement on page 71 uses the transfers to and from reserves to balance the income and expenditure. So when that money enters the reserves, I presume it will be identified as restricted reserves for those programmes. Is that the way that it's done, or is it done differently?
So we track the reserves largely very much on a programme by programme basis.
Right, that's the question.
Because our approval so far through the Combined Authority have been very much on a programme by programme basis.
Yes.
So the exception to that is the general budgets, where we've got quite substantial general reserve, and as we move forward, we'll look at how we release that back into the delivery pipelines. Yeah,
okay, thank you very much. Sorry, but briefly, is there a statement of those reserves in this report, or is that separate?
The financial accounts do include a statement of reserves. The actual combat, because of the fact that these accounts need to combine policing, fire and general budgets.
Right.
It's probably not as clear as it will be in the detailed combined authority finance updates, and there will be one going in September, which will probably cover that.
So if we want to identify where the unrestricted, the general reserves are in order, then that will be identified.
The general reserves are clearly stated. It's just they're not split by activity stream.
Thank you very much.
It's quite a challenge reading the accounts and reports, and thank you for those questions. I've spotted something on a second read that I'd just like to ask about. Mike, page 82, the police fund outturn. On the general budget outturn and the fire, the variance matches the difference between the approved budget and the outturn. But on several of the items on the police fund, it doesn't. I just wondered if you could explain why that is.
I've got the page open.
Yes.
In the context of the policing and the police fund in particular, quite often budgets are set in advance of awareness of what funding settlements will be. So in our pre-meeting, for instance, you queried why the budget actually increased by £5 million year on year. It had to spend. And it's a similar thing is that there's around December time when the budget's set, there's an indicative local government funded settlement, and the Home Office puts the policing settlements in. Then the grants are formalised and specified. So the variances tend to be that the delivery and the budgets have changed from the actual day one budget setting to the delivery. Overall as well, we need to remember that the Chief Constable has operational independence, and his budgets are given, and he's allowed to use those budgets as he sees fit for whatever the emerging issues are within the region. So you will see some differences between lines of budget, which are going through the SOB, which is the police's key governance committee, and overseen by the Deputy Mayor, Police, Fire and Crime. So those movements are separately scrutinised, and there's regularly financial updates that come through there.
Okay. Thanks. But perhaps a footnote might be useful
for
anybody reading.
And work out, because I have a list of the things that we'll look at.
On page 124, an issue I asked about at the briefing, in the expenditure and income analysed by nature, there's the gain or loss of disposal on non-current assets, and there was 847 entry for 25-26. If you could explain what that is. It's quite a substantial sum in this.
I'm still waiting for the detail on that, Chair, so I'll bring that back. I did ask, but at a holiday period, and it doesn't sit within the general budget, it sits within policing, I think. So I'm just waiting for the response, but I'll circulate that to the committee and make sure that it's appropriately reflected in these statements if you feel there's a note needed.
Okay. If I could go to the annual governance statement, page 197 of the papers. This is the appendix 1, the section B on ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement. We do, as it clearly states there, hold regular online public scrutiny meetings, which cover the committees and the main authority. But we do also have the Economic Board and the Transport Board, and that's who are not online cast. I think it would be important in terms of how we account for ourselves that the report does cover the different circumstances for those boards. That could be taken on board.
We certainly can. I mean, they are advisory boards rather than strictly speaking committees, but we can.
Thank you. On page 198, which is over the page, obviously in terms of some of our functions, particularly the transport schemes and proposals often can be quite controversial, and ensuring that we have adequate consultation and communication arrangements on those. I just wondered whether that was something that might be appropriate for an area of focus during the current year in terms of what our strategies are for consultation and communications.
I think we'll consider that and pick that up with the transport team, who are doing a lot of work at the moment on the local transport plan and the operational document. And I think there may even be a requirement for them to consult on that formally anyway. So we'll bring that feedback through, but in the context of these accounts and as a lot of our transport functions are effectively delegated through the local authority partners, that development is probably not being picked up at this point.
So some of the key decisions are made at the combined authority, both the local transport plan, the bus service improvement plan, the local transport delivery plan. You know, there are lots and lots of big items there that do have potential major impacts on communities in different parts of the authority's areas. So I think that is something that's important. There's a clear framework, and the AGS, of course, is a statement of what we're going to be looking at in the next year.
I would support that.
Councillor Goodrich.
I get a lot of emails about the transport and where it's going, how it's going to be sorted out. And I'm conscious that actually it fits within the combined authority portfolio, and we need to keep a real close eye on what's going on.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
We've also got other consultations, for example, precept, so we can get some consistency across that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, this is very much an area for discussion because, as you said, we have got very different parts of this authority. A central city is one thing, a very rural North Yorkshire is something else, and we have totally different problems.
Okay, I think there's a degree of consensus. That's an area that needs to be looked at and needs to be flagged in the area of focus for this year. Thank you. Right. If there's no other questions or comments, can we agree the 5 recommendations that are in the paper, along with taking on board the comments that have just been made?
Yes.
Is that agreeable? Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on then to item 9, the Ombudsman Annual Report 2025-26 and data protection complaints. Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. For those who've been on this committee or in the 2 council's audit committees, this will be quite a familiar report. It's the annual update from the Local Government Social Care Ombudsman's annual report letter, which goes out to all local authorities, including combined authorities, each year, summarising the performance against complaints that the Ombudsman has received. For those unfamiliar with the Ombudsman provides an independent final point of appeal for complaints against local authorities, including combined authorities, once they've exhausted their own complaints procedures. It's fair to say our complaints procedure is quite new. It was approved last year, having been through this committee in, I think, April, approved in June at combined authority. And then the last annual review letter came to this committee last July. Members should be heartened that the statistics are what we would hope them to be this year. Last year, we'd had 2 complaints lodged with the Ombudsman. This year, we've had 4. But the outcome of that is that none of those complaints were investigated and none of them were upheld. Since this report was published, we have received additional information benchmarking us against other authorities across the country, which provides a little more information around the categories of complaints that were lodged with the Ombudsman. And what we have noticed is that some of the categories that those complaints were headed under don't really neatly align with combined authority functions. So it's quite likely, however, we haven't received confirmation that some of those complaints may have been council complaints that were incorrectly logged against the combined authority when they were received. So the data for that, although albeit limited data, is available in the Appendix 1 to this report and Appendix 2. The next 2 points in the report are around our own internal complaints performance, which lead into potential Ombudsman complaints, and an additional ask for the committee to endorse the introduction of a data protection complaints policy, and I'll briefly explain what that means. So in terms of our own internal complaints performance, in terms of figures, still very low. We've had 4 complaints within the 25-26 period. Of those, 2 have gone right the way through the process, through stage 1 and stage 2 to completion. 1 was resolved informally, and another was referred to another complaints procedure as it fell under one of the exemptions in our policy. And the final stage, as I say, is for the introduction of a new data protection complaints policy. As the report outlines, this is a new requirement and new legislation that local authorities now, rather than the Information Commissioner, should be the first point of complaint for data protection related complaints. This is distinct from freedom of information requests or EIR complaints. They still do go to the Information Commissioner, but this is around data handling, data sharing issues, subject access requests around an individual's data rather than broad information that the combined authority may hold. At this stage, we've set out some broad principles in the report that we would like to introduce that reflect the legislation. In practical terms, it will mean very little in terms of what we need to do, because we already have an in-house data protection officer who would handle complaints in the first instance. But this is to seek endorsement to introduce those into the current complaints policy of the combined authority rather than create a separate standalone policy. So that's the outline of the report. Happy to take any questions, albeit I know we've got limited data on the details of the specific complaints, but happy to take any questions that members may have.
Okay, Councillor Goodwin.
Oh, you mentioned that there was some complaints that had been found to be more council orientated than the combined authority. Were the complainants advised of that and set on the right track?
I'm not sure, because they went straight to the Ombudsman and you don't receive the specifics of the complaints themselves. All we get is under broad categories. So the categories that they fell under, one was to do with trees, another one was to do with parking, and another was to do with tax.
Right.
So tax potentially if it was related to our preset process, but we haven't got any information on the complainant or the subject matter. But the other 2 are almost certainly to do with councils. And I think that reflects some of the queries that we receive in terms of FOI, corporate complaints generally within the combined authority. For every complaint that we receive to do with combined authority functions, we probably receive 3 or 4 which people have attributed to the combined authority from the councils. I think it's a reasonable misunderstanding from most members of the public due to the name combined authority, which has come at the time of local government reorganisation.
It's where you direct that complaint, and I don't know whether the Ombudsman will do that therefore.
I'm not sure whether that's the case, but I can speak on behalf of myself and colleagues that if we receive one within the authority, we will always refer them to the relevant local authority.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Just on that, Paul and I were also talking about the combined authority's website and how it can potentially help direct people to the right place. You think about buses. Do you complain to the operator? If it's a socially provided bus service, do you complain to the authority that's providing it? If that's within a policy framework, do you complain to the combined authority? There are some complex areas of different responsibilities. So having clear information on the website, that I think is going to be quite important to help ordinary members of the public know where to go on some of these issues.
These FAQs that they can.
Yeah.
If I might, Chair, I think a very valid point. The pattern that we've spotted from this is that we've received very few complaints, probably not enough patterns for us to learn from. It hasn't identified any particular concerns in terms of our own services, but practically what we have seen through our complaints is exactly the point you raise. It's not so much about what the combined authority is doing itself, it's around the services that it's commissioning, both in terms of transport, skills, economy. A lot of the work that we carry out is done through procured contractors or organisations that are operating under grant funding agreements. And whilst we have arrangements in place through our complaints procedures, I think they can be strengthened and clarified. So our piece of work through 26-27 will be to expand upon what we already have and make sure that the complaints procedure meets the end user, members of the public who are generally doing it through a third party rather than ourselves.
Thanks.
Okay. Can I just ask one other question about the recommendation? You've asking us to endorse the incorporation of a formal data protection complaints process into the existing correspondent and corporate complaints policy. Is it your intention to bring that document, once you've revised it, back to this?
If members would prefer it to come back to the committee, we can, or if you're happy to do so, we can consult outside of committee with committee members ahead of taking it through cabinet for ratification, whichever you think is most appropriate, Chair.
Members happy to be consulted online?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before approval, it will be in the public domain because it would be approved via cabinet. So I wouldn't want anyone watching to think that we were doing it behind closed doors.
Yeah. Okay. Are we? If there's no other questions, are we happy to agree the recommendations? Picking up that final additional point.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. Let us move on then, and thank you, Paul, for the report and clean bill of health. Everyone who's involved. Right, item 10, the risk register update. Debbie.
Thank you. So I'd like to present the corporate risk register, which details the key strategic risks that the CA are currently exposed to, how these are being managed, and that's evidenced in the pack through the detail of mitigations and actions taken against each of the risks. There is, of course, supplementary information provided in Appendix 1C, and just for the committee, absolutely committed to continue working with you in how that supplementary information is shaped to ensure that you've got the information that you need at a glance to summarise that risk register. So any comments in that area would be really welcome. So since the committee last reviewed this risk register in April, there's been a comprehensive review from our senior leadership team, and that's to make sure that the strategic risk register is completely aligned to the proposed priorities set out in our draft corporate plan. There is, just members are asked to note, a typing error in Corp 8, equal pay. It's a typing error where the inherent risk and the current mitigated risk have been mixed up. The current mitigated risk is unchanged at 9, so it hasn't risen. It's remains stable since the last time the committee reviewed this risk register, so apologies for that. So to briefly summarise the strategic risk landscape for you, we've seen an increase in 3 risk areas since April. The first one around organisational capacity and capability, which is Corp 3. Corp 4 is organisational resilience, and Corp 7 is legal compliance. The risk in these areas does not necessarily indicate a decline in organisational performance at all. It rather reflects the growing complexity of our operating environment, especially alongside the scale of our strategic ambitions and responsibilities as we strive towards becoming established. So as we continue to evolve as an organisation, we deliver increasingly ambitious programmes of work, and this places a greater demand on our organisational capacity, effective governance arrangements and compliance requirements. And the corporate risk register recognises those challenges, and it ensures that the risk exposure is transparently reported and effectively managed in the detail you can see in the action plans and the mitigations against each risk. I'd also like to take the opportunity to draw your attention to 2 new programme risks that have been identified at strategic level. So those are the bus delivery programme and the local net zero accelerator programme. So these risks have been escalated since April through the risk management governance structure to the strategic level, and they're now receiving the highest level of oversight in the organisation. Also included in this report are recommendations arising from a much needed comprehensive review of the organisation's risk appetite statement. And as a result of that review, It's proposed that risk categories across 10 risk categories are updated to better reflect the CA's operating environment and strategic priorities. A full summary is provided in the papers submitted, just for your information, and to explain the rationale behind that review and the summary proposals. I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Councillor Love.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is not to say that this authority will be risk averse. It just means that we recognise the risks, and in the 4x4 grid, we have really only got 3 levels that should cause us real worry. But risk is necessary in some of the decisions that the authority's taken, and when we recognise the risks, we must just evaluate how risky they are. Thank you.
Councillor Lacey.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge and thank Debbie for putting on the session the other week. Being newbie to the committee, I found it extremely useful to work through how this works. I think points we made there, and you've reflected it in your comment, being very clear about risk appetite within the context of how we manage risk is, for me, very important, and you've taken that on board, probably going in that direction anyway. On page 254, which is the high-level summary, the coloured one, I just wanted to clarify whether, you've answered the question in terms of it's a bigger, more complex, more challenging environment, but we don't see any down arrows, any sort of improvements. Is that because they've been removed or because none of them have reduced?
So there has been, so in the pack you'll see some information about the senior leadership team review that took place in July, and a significant amount of risks have been de-escalated to directorate level, and I think that's a testament to the fact that the governance structure cogs are actually now in motion, which is really promising. But you'll see a number of risks there that have been de-escalated. In regards to the summary, which you're referring to, that is the summary following those significant changes that have happened.
If people go direct to that summary, they don't get the true picture.
Absolutely.
That's my point, because the de-escalation is on page wherever it is earlier.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate we're in a transition period at the minute between that much larger risk register and how that's been reviewed into the smaller, more specific, very comprehensive risk register that we see in terms of that COP 1, 2, 3, 4. In future, you will absolutely see that. It's at the minute articulated on a different paper, which I know isn't ideal, but thank you for bringing it up. But if you refer to there, it talks about those de-escalated risks.
Can I just come in on that point as well? Because Councillor Lacey, with you being new to the committee, you probably haven't seen the journey. And we've effectively, our first risk register as an authority that we produced was a single corporate risk register, which included risks that probably shouldn't be considered at a corporate level. And Debbie's done the work with you and with the leadership to de-escalate those risks. And this is pretty much a one-off change, I think, in terms of implementing the improved risk structure. So moving forward, the summary that Debbie's providing will be appropriate, because it will show those escalations and de-escalations would just be through a long step change process right now.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I make a suggestion therefore? That
absolutely.
On this page 254, there's a footnote that sends people to the registers that we can't see to explain what's going on this page.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah.
It would help if people are looking at this, as my colleague says, it doesn't look terribly good, whereas the underlying is on a different page. If we can get people to look at the different page, that would be much better.
Absolutely, thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, can I echo Councillor Lacey's comment about the risk management workshop we had? It was really good, and I think we should also record our appreciation for all the work that has been done moving this whole risk management process forward. It's an awful lot of work has gone into this, and that's very, very clear from these papers compared with where we used to be. So very, very, very pleasing to see. So if there are no other questions or comments, Can we agree the recommendations in the report? Yes, three recommendations. Is that agreed?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Let's move on then to item 11, the business continuity policy.
It's me again. Apologies. The drawn in my voice. So I present to you the business continuity policy. This draft has been written in partnership with North Yorkshire Council Resilience and Emergencies team, who we have a service level agreement with. It's also been written with engagement with the Police, Fire and Crime Directorate, and it's been checked by Veritao for added assurance as a result of our latest audit, internal audit. The adoption of this policy is recognised as a key component of good governance. It's aligned to public sector best practice, and it provides the foundation for developing a business continuity plan. So it's a brand new draft policy. It's a policy specifically for the general budgets area only, and that's non-fire and rescue authority functions. And that's because the Fire and Rescue Authority has their own business continuity procedures, policies and systems in place because they're a Category 1 responder. At the current time, the general budgets area isn't, although we are following best practice here in our policy. The policy defines what our business critical functions might be, how are they defined, defines accountability within the organisation, talks about the governance structure, and then talks about the expectations around exercising and maintenance requirements. It also sets out a timeline proposal for a business continuity plan. And the plan is the operational document that sits underneath the policy, which talks about what do we do in the event of a disruption to our services. So the intention, the proposal is that we develop that plan over the next 9 months, and we bring that back to the committee in March for you to have a look at how we intend to plan our business continuity arrangements. And obviously that plan is subject to annual review. So the recommendations here to approve the draft policy for the general budgets area of YMYCA, and then to approve the proposed timeline set out in section 5 of the paper for the development of the corporate business continuity plan.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Lacey. Sorry, Rachel.
One observation from me. Sorry, David. The terminology is really complex and complicated. I think you meant Fire and Rescue Service rather than the authority.
Yeah, sorry,
Don't
apologies.
worry, that's fine. I just wanted to point out to notice.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Lacey.
It's a simple suggestion. It's obviously at an early stage. It's an important thing. Would there be a plan at some point? I noticed that there's all the workshops, but I gather you'll be gathering information to develop the plan rather than put the plan on the road and do a business continuity exercise once the plan is in place. And I wonder whether that shouldn't be a final piece of assurance, if you like, that the plan is fit for purpose, that you've done an exercise. I know we do these things in terms of
Absolutely, Councillor Lacey. And in our service level agreement with North Yorkshire Council, we're planning what that exercise will look like towards the end of the year. But that will be
it's within the timeline. It's not identified with the timeline, I don't think. So on page 281, it will be there.
Absolutely. And when I bring the plan back, there will be a regular exercising routine that's built into that. But thank you for pointing that.
Okay, if there are no other questions, can we thank you for this report and agree the 2 recommendations to approve the business continuity plan and to approve the proposed timelines. Is that agreed? Thank you. Right, let's move on then to item 12, the Q4 Treasury Management Update for 2025-26. Mike.
Thanks, Chair. This report is in the pack for noting and provides the committee with a Q4 Treasury Management Update for 2025-2026. The recommendation is that members note the Treasury Management activities and financial position of the authority at the year end with regard to Treasury Management. The key point to note is that the Combined Authority continues to operate without any borrowing in respect of its general budget activities. Our treasury management activity therefore remains focused on the management and investment of cash balances, with priority given to security, liquidity and then yield. The end of March 2026, total cash balances stood at £77.1 million, underlying compared with £84.2 million at Q3. The reduction reflects defrayal towards the end of the fiscal year, largely offset by some early receipt of some of the 26-27 funding settlements that are coming through. During 25-26, the Authority generated £3.155 million of interest income. And members should also note that North Yorkshire Council's treasury management arrangements have continued to perform well, with returns outperforming the SONIA benchmark by approximately 0.42 percentage points on average during the year. The report also notes that we are reviewing the current service level agreement and exploring additional treasury management options to ensure that surplus cash balances are managed as efficiently as possible, and that opportunities to maximise returns remain under review. Finally, the wider economic backdrop remains uncertain. Inflation remains above the Bank of England's target, and interest rates remained at 3.75% throughout the quarter. Markets continue to respond to inflationary and geopolitical pressures. However, current Treasury performance remains strong and there are no issues of concern to report. In summary, Chair, we remain debt-free in respect of general budget activities, cash balances remain strong, and investment returns have outperformed budget expectations. And at that point, I'll leave it for questions.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I'm just a general query, really, and my naivety shows that I probably should know this. But as a combined authority, I mean, clearly they're not in a position to borrow. They don't need borrowing at the moment. But should there be a need for borrowing for any major capital project? Do they have the same access to funds as the local authorities that we represent have, or are there restrictions?
Yeah, pretty much. So we have powers to borrow. Powers to borrow were set in legislation back in the end of 2024, early 2025, I think, and then the new Devolution Act cements that anyway and allows combined authorities to borrow. At the moment, it's just the maturity of our capital plan doesn't require us to advance fund any activity. If we were to enter into that strategy, there would need to be some changes that came through this committee, because we need to change our treasury management strategy to reflect that and agree our limits. But that would come as the activity emerged.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Chair.
If there's no other questions, can I welcome what Mike said about revising the SLS to try and ensure that we optimise the income on our balances, cash balances. Can we agree the recommendation to note the contents of this report?
Yes.
We're in the home straight now, almost, based on item number 13, the 2026-27 Q1 Treasury Management Update.
So thanks, Chair. So this might be a little bit Groundhog Day in terms of the content from the previous paper. But again, the report is for noting summarises the Q1 Treasury Management activity, which was to the end of June 2027. The position remains largely consistent with the report we've just discussed, as we continue to operate without any borrowing in respect of general budget activities. The key change in this quarter is a significant increase in cash balances, which have arisen from £77.1 million at the end of the year to £133.9 million at the end of the Q1. That's in the context of the Combined Authority receiving the majority of its funding settlements in advance. We have a broadly £200 million budget, so we expect that balance to reduce over the year as delivery expends the cash reserves. As a result of the advanced funding profile, the positive investment performance reported in Q4 has continued. An investment income of £821,000 has been achieved during the first quarter, and current forecasts suggest the Treasury income will once again exceed the original budget assumptions in the year. As we've developed the team, one of the things I'm asking the team to focus on are becoming slightly more accurate in the Treasury management forecasting, because that will help with some of our core cost coverage and ultimately ensure we've got the right amount of funding out for investment. The investment performance and economic trends continue to reflect the performance noted in the Q1 report as well. Interest rates have remained consistent. So in summary, performance remains strong and continues to outperform benchmarks. There are no treasury management issues at this stage to bring to the committee's attention.
And my same comment as before, balances of cash has gone up again. It's now 13, so sooner we can get that SLS sorted, the better. Right, are there any questions? If there's no questions, can we agree the recommendations to note this one as well?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Item 14, review of the Constitution. Rachel or Paul?
Yeah, I'm happy to introduce this one, Chair. I'm sure Rachel may want to contribute as we move forward. So this is a topic that once again is very familiar to the committee because it's been a review that's taken place for some time now since the Combined Authority first launched. But as you'll be aware, in the last year, we've had a significant piece of work through the Constitution Working Group and a dedicated in-house resource to completely relaunch the Constitution of the Combined Authority. Reason being, when we first launched the Combined Authority, we introduced a constitution which was fit for purpose, but it was modelled on a separate constitution from another combined authority. So while it closely mirrored the legal functions that we have, it didn't precisely, and there were a lot of practical processes that were set out in the constitution that are no longer fit for purpose as the organisation has matured. So this piece of work's been ongoing for some time. Its purpose was to make it reflect entirely the legal foundation of the Combined Authority, but also to be more of a usable, readable manual for staff and for members. So it's much easier to track the core Combined Authority functions and processes and not to confuse them with what might be happening elsewhere or elsewhere within the Combined Authority. So this piece of work has been going on for some time. What has happened in the meantime is that we've seen the passage of the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Act, which received royal assent at the end of April. On the one hand, this is a fantastic opportunity for combined authorities and for mayors and for devolution. In terms of our constitution review, it's created an additional headache for us in that we're having to walk back some of the work that we've done on the constitution review and now redesign it with that in mind. So originally we had planned to bring the new constitution to the combined authority, or as it's now known, the cabinet, in June. That hasn't been possible, and we're now looking to bring that to cabinet in October. So the work behind the scenes is proceeding. This committee will be consulted along the way, and the Constitution Working Group will be fully engaged. But this report is just to provide a bit of a flavour of what the Devolution Act entails and what we've already done to try and implement some of the more urgent changes that have come out of that. Unfortunately, it's not possible to provide a full review of everything that's happening in the Devolution Act because it's simply such a large document, and we're still carrying out work to understand and break down exactly what that means for us. So the first thing I think to go into is that combined authorities are now designated into tiers. The reason for this is that currently, or prior to the Devolution Act, all of the combined authorities were subject to their own statutory instrument. So ours is the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority Order, took effect in 2023. Every other combined authority has one as well. This does mean that while they're broadly similar, they all have subtly different powers, responsibilities, processes in the way that they deliver functions. The Act is designed to bring them into a more consistent footing, all with the same statutory footing, all with the same statutory powers. But for those that might be younger in their journey or might be smaller or have different arrangements in place, there are different designations for how they're structured. So there are foundation combined authorities, there are strategic authorities, and there are established strategic authorities. Combined authorities are strategic authorities. You can use the two synonymously, but what it essentially means is that at the basic level, you get bare functions with a foundation authority. If you become an established authority, you get the full range of devolved functions. Where we are at the moment is we are a strategic authority, so we sit in the middle of that tiered structure, but we are awaiting a confirmation from government at the moment on our application to become an established authority, which will give us much more access to devolved functions and powers. Another thing that the Devolution Act does is standardise a lot of the decision-making arrangements. Currently, under our order, there are different weighted decision-making around budgets, transport, compulsory purchase, and any number of other decisions that the authority or the mayor might take. What this does is put almost all of them in the same category of a simple majority rather than weighted between different authorities. Moving down, I think a key introduction of the Act is the introduction of commissioners. This is a new role that is available to mayors and to combined authorities. The mayor can introduce a commissioner for one or more of its new legal competences. So these are transport and infrastructure, skills and employment, housing and strategic planning, economic development, environment and climate, health and public service reform, public safety, culture, and rural and coastal affairs. That's not to say that these are all new services and directorates that are going to spring up out of the combined authority, but these are the new legal functions that the combined authority has to implement and give mind to. The commissioners, there is a formal process for their appointment and for their dismissal. That was set out in an addendum document that was presented to members a couple of months ago and has now received cabinet approval. We have yet to appoint any commissioners, but there is a process in place at the moment for the mayor to do so. There are additional powers for the precept levy and borrowing of the combined authority, and I think a key element for this combined authority is that there is a new local scrutiny arrangement coming probably in 2027. We have limited information about what that means at the moment, but there are additional regulations that will be coming later in the year that will help us build that. There are additional transport functions, there are additional planning and housing functions with the designation of the combined authority as a strategic planning authority. And there is a new statutory duty for the combined authority to improve health outcomes and reduce health inequalities throughout all of its functions. So I think I've already outlined briefly what the situation is with the current review, that we've still got work to do. We've still got further engagement with this committee and the Constitution Working Group. We have, as I say, approved an addendum document through Cabinet to implement any urgent requirements from the Devolution Act, and it may be that we need to take further addendums as the requirements come to light through our review. So that's the review. I won't go into the rest of it word for word, but quite happy to take any comments or questions that the committee may have.
Okay, Councillor Lunn and then Councillor Lacey.
Thank you. The transport costs may be met by way of transport levy to the constituent councils. Does that mean they're just levying it from the constituent councils, or they're allowing the constituent councils to add it up to, say, their 5% maximum?
I think I would have to defer to our Section 73 officer on the details of levy to my limitations.
So the distinction there is between a levy and a precept. That the levy is an amount chargeable by the combined authority to the individual constituent authorities in return, effectively, for delivering the transport functions that they used to deliver before the mayor. So there obviously will be some discussion around what those delivery areas are, but that shouldn't, in theory, lead to an increased burden on the public, because it's a little bit moving things along and providing a regional approach rather than two individual approaches.
So it's transferring from one transport authority to another.
So the levy is outside. Effectively, anything that you as a council would pay to the combined authority via a levy comes out of your overall budget without you. So if you needed to raise council tax to do it, would have to be within your 5%, which I think is the question. If the mayor were to choose to raise a precept for transport, which I think the Act allows him to do, subject to mobilisation of the aspects of the legislation which hasn't happened yet, then that levy would be levied by the mayor. And as major precepting authorities, combined authorities are not bound by the 5%, so it wouldn't affect, you would not need to accommodate that. The mayor would then raise a precept separately. And he is currently not bound by any limit because mayor and combined authorities aren't.
Okay. Councillor, is there a supplement?
No, it's something different.
That's
you
okay.
carry on.
That's fine. I've worked in the health and care sector for 30 years plus, and if complexity around transport that you indicated earlier, this is sort of multiplied by 10. So the question and a concern, I suppose, is the way in which the combined authority seeks to deliver the new functions as and when they come in. And that's the first question in terms of how and when does the health bit fit within what we're doing. But just to encourage the absolute earliest, there are so many partners, and I know that the health sector is not in the best sort of organised form at the moment, still going through transition. But exactly who does what in a constitutional sense does need to be thrashed out very, very carefully. So it's just an encouragement to say it's very short section there, 4.2, and 4.22 just says the extent to which we need to work out. I can see that there's a huge can of worms, not in a negative sense, just in a this is complex. So just to encourage that. And I'd be interested as a member of this committee, but in more general terms, in my role here in North Yorkshire, as indeed I'm sure partners in York will be, keen to see this done well and complementary to what exists at the moment.
Rachel.
Councillor, if it assists on the health, we're still working through what that looks like.
I'm sure.
The act.
I've read the act bit as well. It's also very
massive, yeah. So we're still working through that. Of course, you know, we will be collaborating with constituent authorities and other partners as well. The working through includes where does it sit within the combined authority. We don't have, it's struggling for resources, it is. So we're looking at resource of that as well. So all those discussions are still underway internally before we actually get to the nuts and bolts of what that actually means. So we will be able to feed back to all members if that helps as we go along the way. And of course, as a member of Audit Governance Committee, we will be regularly over the summer consulting, and there is within this agenda there's a provision for an additional Audit Governance Committee meeting, I think in September, which we're planning on being a one-item agenda, which is about the Constitution. But before that, we want to have a series of pre-briefing sessions with members around different elements of the proposed new Constitution. So you won't be going into that meeting cold, if that helps.
I hope the health conversation doesn't happen when I'm on holiday, but you can check that out too. It always happens. So
I think it does flag the scale of the change that's going on, and I suppose, you know, the obvious question is, yes, we've got a new timetable, but if we're waiting for the regulations, if we're still working through the implications of the Act, you know, how realistic is this forward timetable? Because we've got to get it right.
Yeah.
And you know, I can see that we have another couple of meetings almost there, and then the next set of regs come out, or the decision on the strategic authority.
I'm happy to recognise the Constitution is always work in progress in a sense, and therefore
really hard work in process.
And we're trying to balance at the moment, limping along with a Constitution that in areas possibly isn't fit for our purposes versus as custodian of the Constitution, I want to get this right. So if we need more time, as a committee or officers need more time, then, you know, we're aiming for autumn is what we're saying, but you know, it may take longer than that. We've also got within our Constitution fire and rescue, police and crime functionality, and police reform is something that's been on the agenda. So things it's just a moving feast at the moment that we're just trying to get our heads around what we want out of the Constitution, as well as this legislation coming in, as well as there are other things on the horizon. So I want to get in a position that the Constitution is a document which then an amendment or a tweak is an easier exercise.
Okay, Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you. So I'm looking at this and there's a little bit of me which is really worried. So it surrounds the areas where there is the possibility to appoint commissioners. Now, you'll appreciate that there's a lot of crossover in the areas between the two councils and the mayor or a combined authority, not least of which is housing and strategic planning. And North Yorkshire is currently undergoing its formation of its new local plan. And I need to understand how that will affect our local plan and our strategic planning position on the local plan as we go forward, because it needs to mirror, and otherwise it'll be found unsound when it goes to public examination. So I'm really worried about the commissioners. So who will appoint those commissioners? On what basis will they be appointed? With what qualifications and what salary package will come with those commissioners? Because that's another cost to the combined authority. So for me, there's a whole host of issues in here which worry me significantly.
So if it helps, I sit on a combined authority monitoring officers group, and I think this is a key area up and down the country that everybody's still trying to work through. But they would be an employee put on different terms and conditions. So it's what that looks like. There's an absence of detailed guidance to assist us with that. I'm going to a meeting in August with MHCLG and also colleagues, other monitoring officers from other CAs, so I can certainly feed that back to yourselves. We are anticipating that it would be an independent remuneration panel that would look at that allowance, and we're looking to recruit an IRP, because historically we used to from City of York, to from North Yorkshire Council, but there are capacity issues around that for this time around. So at the last cabinet approved us to kickstart that remuneration panel recruitment. So we're quite away from that in terms of internal mood music, for want of a better word. I think the only potential commissioner appetite at the moment is health. But as I've already said in the previous question, we don't have officers at the moment in that space. So
can I just say I'm less worried about the remuneration and more worried about the qualifications of the people who are appointed as commissioners to do the work.
Yeah.
Which of course flags, obviously that's a decision for the combined authority itself, but clearly the constitutional framework in which all that happens is our concern. So, yes, that will clearly, if there is an intention to move on that front, and we need to have some priority for that within our constitutional review process.
If I might, Chair, the addendum document that I referred to earlier, happy to provide the committee with a copy for reference, but that does include an appointment process for commissioners, and included in that is a role for overview and scrutiny. So when the mayor is minded to appoint a commissioner to a role, it will mirror very closely the procedure that the London Mayor has with deputy mayors. So if 3 or more members of overview and scrutiny wish to hold a hearing with the prospective candidate, they're able to do so before appointment. So they can't block the appointment, but they can interview and question the prospective candidate and the mayor ahead of that appointment to make sure that they're supportive of that, and that the appropriate person with the right qualifications is appointed to the role.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, Councillor Goodrich, my pages are open at that particular page, 315, so I was going to ask very similar questions. And I have similar concerns. I'm also sit on the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee as well. So I'm glad all that you've answered one of my, so almost things I was going to ask have been answered. There is just one very simple thing that I'm sure you can answer. It says that the mayor can appoint up to 10 commissioners under strategic areas, but you've only listed 9.
Yes.
What's the 10th area? I'm just curious.
The reason being is, and I think this was something that came out of the final stages of its passage through Parliament, is that the Commissioner roles don't have to align to just one competence. It can be for more than one. So it allows crossover for two areas,
right,
with a total of 10 commissioners in total. How many authorities would appoint 10? I'm not sure. But it allows that overlap between them where there might be a close relationship.
I think, given the change in regime in Downing Street recently and the indications that there's going to be more devolved authority given to the mayors, I think we need to keep a really close eye on this. And as a member of the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee, I'll also be wanting to keep a keen eye on it as well. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Okay. Right, if there's no more questions, can we agree to note the report, but also the discussions and potential relative priorities? Is that agreeable?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Right, minutes of the GIAC and IAC for review. One of those was a later circulation. So if there's any questions first, we don't unfortunately have Dr. Green with us today on the GIAC meeting of the 25th of June. I think it's certainly welcome to see the comprehensive work that the GIAC is doing. One of the things that I've noted is that they have a clear actions agreed section at the end of their minutes, as does the IAC. And I think that's perhaps something that we ought to be doing ourselves as an audit and governance committee. I talked to Will before the meeting started, so perhaps that's something we ought to see from including the minutes of this meeting. That's agreeable. Yeah. Okay. So if there's no questions on the GIAC, are there any questions on the IAC of the same date? No. Okay. Can we agree to note those two sets of minutes? Yes. Thank you very much. Item 16, programme of work. Last page of the package of documents. So outlines the proposed programme up to next year. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, we're happy to note. Thank you very much. Right, urgent business. I have one item that we've had a request from Transport for the North. Paul, do you want to introduce it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you'll be aware, York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority is one of the constituent authorities of Transport for the North, which is a statutory body in charge with transport in the north of England. It has a number of committees and boards that the Combined Authority appoints to. One which we haven't appointed to before now is the Audit and Governance Committee. We've been asked before to provide nominations and we haven't been compelled to, or we haven't been able to. This year we've been asked that all constituent authorities nominate a member to sit on that committee throughout the year. It would mean attendance at 4 meetings. I think 3 are remaining for this year. The majority of them held remotely on Teams, with 1 physical meeting in Manchester. This just to take a view from members whether anybody wishes to volunteer themselves to sit on that committee. It would be subject to cabinet approval of the Combined Authority. Obviously, as officers, we can't compel members to. I appreciate everybody has a full commitment in the diary already. But if anybody is prepared to volunteer for it, I'm happy to take that nomination forward.
I'm not going to volunteer.
Right.
Is it any member of either authority? And the second question, yes, is there a political proportionality issue around it?
It would be any member from this committee rather than the constituent authorities of this combined authority. And as far as I'm aware, there are no political restrictions on that.
Sorry, Chair. And subs can they be sub?
They can, yes. Yes, we're entitled to 1 member and 1 substitute.
I mean, I'm happy to be one or the other, but I don't really.
I just wanted clarity on the.
I'm a bit of a sucker, really, in the sense that I kind of feel if there's an opportunity, then we ought to take it. And so, in the absence of any of my colleagues raising their hands as high as they can, I'm happy, Chair, to put my name forward.
Okay,
I can be the sub if that's okay.
Thank you very much for both volunteering. Just anybody else wish to throw their hat in the ring? No. Okay, right. Well, you have 2 volunteers. Thank you very much. Okay, date of the next meeting. There's a flag, obviously, that has been made about a potential additional meeting simply to consider the Constitution in September. And hopefully once I'll be clear that we are able to run, then as much notice as possible, obviously, in terms of arranging a date that we can all hopefully get to, and consultation on that. And our next scheduled meeting is Tuesday, the 20th of October, 10:30 in the Hudson Room at the City of York Council. So can I thank you all for your attendance and participation, contributions, and a safe journey home. Thank you.